I like the fact, Jim, that you hired the shrink when you didn't have the company. And it was just you, and that was great. Al, you had something you wanted to...
I was going to add, in the other important part in balances, and this particularly applies to technology, is that everything goes through cycles. And there are times when you're launching the product, designing the product, or getting ready for this, where the team needs to be there all the time and available, certainly 24/7. But there are other times where there is a gap. And in technology, is always recognize where that gap is, take advantage of it where you can, and then be ready to hit it again when the next cycle starts.
Does anybody have any questions for our panel?
I have an answer I'd like to give you haven't asked about.
Yes.
I think at the very beginning, a good business idea has a couple of ingredients, and that is solving a problem and finding someone to pay for it. But then it becomes a business when you add capital and talent. Until then, it's not a business. But that could be misleading, those first two things. And I come from the media space, and so a lot of things in media have gone in the wrong direction lately because media often did not understand what their business model really was. Newspapers thought they were in the business of selling news. Wrong. 20% of the revenues came from people who bought their news products. Newspapers were and are in the business of delivering audiences to advertisers. That's the real business. So you've got to think, what problem am I solving for whom, and will they pay me enough to make it a business? It's not always immediately obvious what it is. You've got to think it through, maybe with some help. Because if you don't, the foundation of your idea is not strong enough for a business.
I got to throw out another question for you, Glenn, because at one point you said something to me I found very provocative, which was that if somebody did something wrong, you would let a lot of people know that, and that there was a lesson there. You want to elaborate?
Sure. This is a very provocative and controversial thing I do, and I would say that my culture and talent head is trying to wean me of this habit. But when someone makes a mistake, I'll typically take their mistake, or if it's in an email, and broadcast it to a lot of people and say what I think about it. Now, some people say, this is anything from cruel to unfair to, there's all kinds of adjectives to describe it. My issue is that if somebody makes a mistake, some people say you should take them aside quietly. There's this praise in public and, teach in private. And I think we've got that backwards in a sense, because if you make a mistake, what you want is you want everybody to know about it. You want everybody to know it was a bad thing. And then everybody learns. But if you say, oh, you made this bad mistake, you cost us a few $1 million or what have you, let's keep it quiet, then the person sitting next to him doesn't know. And they're likely to make that same mistake. Whereas when you broadcast an email, everybody knows and says, what a bad day, I'm never going to do that. And now the nice thing is, if you fire people because of that, that's a different issue. And we never do that. And so it's a little bit like the Thomas Watson, when somebody made this $10 million mistake, the legend goes, and they came in, they said, are you going to fire him? And he said, I just invested $10 million. Why would I fire him? And we have that same view. So we tell people to have a hardcore but a soft shell. And sometimes, you have a bad day, and that's the reality. Whether you're a professional athlete or, we don't say to our professional quarterbacks, let's not talk about him having a bad day. Or we don't do the Olympics and a gymnast, falls and we say, don't say anything, shut down the TV cameras. No, they're professionals. We treat our people like professionals. Sometimes you have a bad day, and everybody should know about it, and everybody says, I don't want to do that. I just learned something, that's bad. When they have a good day, we broadcast that as well, but not as loud, because they're professionals, and we expect them to deliver. They get paid well, they get compensated to deliver. And so that's tough for people to learn. Again, in this country, we don't like to give, everybody gets a trophy for showing up. And we don't like to give people direct feedback, but that's how they learn, and that's how they get better. And in an environment where it's constantly changing, where every day there's new competition and changes, and you have to move quickly. And we're competing in a world environment. And there's people who are working 18 hours a day that we're competing with. And we've got to understand that, and we got to get tough. And I'd rather be tough on our people than have our customers be tough on us by saying we're going somewhere else because you keep making the same mistake. And so it's, but that's not widely, it's not loved, it's not widely embraced, and it's probably a very provocative management philosophy.
Part of the job description is not to be unhappy alone. It's your job not to be unhappy alone, you know? You're unhappy, share it.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and mine is.
By the way, I really like that because too often entrepreneurs are silent sufferers, and they sit home and they're working weekends,
Yep.
and you do, if you embrace other people, once they realize you're holding yourself to the same standards that they are, they don't actually mind it. And then, you know, it's kind of like we have this debate at home where when my kids used to come home, and still do for my youngest, and sometimes, you know, I would say, well, what'd you think? I said, you had a terrible game. They would sometimes cry and everything, and my wife would say, no, you had a good game. But eventually, as they got older, they say, Dad, how'd I do? And so I said, well, why are you asking me? Because you'll tell me the truth. And they learned that that was better than just getting someone to say, when they inside, they know the answer inside. They know how they did. But sometimes you got to tell them, and that's tough. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, the thing I always tell people is, quite honestly, in business, I love learning. If you're not learning, you're not growing. And quite honestly, the only way to learn is to learn a lot of times from mistakes. And so I was a big proponent, as Glenn, you know, of communicating where people made mistakes, explaining the buildup of how they got to that mistake, what we learned from it, because I never wanted to make the same mistake twice. And if you can categorize those mistakes, learn from them, grow, be a better company, be a better individual, it works. And sometimes it is that hard love, but it really does work in the long term, and it really is important. And more importantly, you know, a lot of times people saw that I held myself to a standard even higher than I expected of them, and they would always seem to rise to that challenge because, again, hiring good people. But the important thing is, you know, to communicate it and to grow from it and to say this is why it's important, I can see how it got there, and then turn it into almost like a small little case study.
Well, I don't agree. So, you know,
Go for it. Go for it, Bonnie.
certainly, I do believe in learning from mistakes. I think it's important that we recognize when there is an error and change. However, singling out somebody, you know, because they did make a mistake and making it apparent to everybody, frankly, I think is demotivating. You know, it reminds me, when I sold my first company, I sold it to a large publicly traded company, LabCorp. And as part of that deal, I had to work for a year. I had a year employment contract, which probably was the worst year of my life. I was ready to slit my throat. And one of the reasons was that nobody ever did anything. They were so afraid. They were afraid they were going to get chastised. They were afraid they were going to lose their job. It was all about CYA. You know, and I think the beauty of an entrepreneurial company is not to have those fears, to take the chance, to take the risk. I mean, that's what it's all about. But then all of a sudden, if you start putting, you know, all these recriminations on these people, and they say, uh-oh, well, maybe if I do this, I'm going to be tomorrow's email, and everybody in the company is going to know that I screwed up. You know, I think it defeats the whole concept of being an entrepreneurial company.
So I would only challenge you for fun. I would only challenge you by saying that in the things we're most successful at in this country, we measure and we do it publicly. And when you go to India, by the way...
Can you just drill down on this? Were you naming people in your emails? Were you
I
naming them?
I do.
You still do it?
Yeah.
I don't think I'd want to work for you.
But let's go to India, go to ITT, go to their secondary schools. I spent a lot of time, and Bob mentioned that Bob Compton, who is a former board member and is an expert in education now around the world, and started in India on a trip, and we were going to schools, because when we visit these countries, we go to orphanages and we go to schools, and we want to understand the fabric of the culture. And in their schools, all their kids were saying, I want to be an engineer, I want to be an astronaut, I want to be a physicist. And he said, you know, I can't imagine having those same answers if I went to our own schools in our country. And that's where 2 Million Minutes started. But all those kids, when you talk about competition, all of their exams are posted. And they're posted outside. And so they know, and they have very public feedback about how they're doing. And this is the same in athletics. It's the same in every competitive sport we have. And the more you do that, the more you make this an open process, in my view, you get better performance. And that's why, if you look at where you want to go, you know, we used to go to India to do development because it was less expensive. You ask developers why they go there, development organizations, why they're going there now, and it's because you have better technical skills in most cases. So it's not just about the dollars. So I'm a big believer in giving people very direct feedback. And I'll just extend that. You know, if you look at the area of HR, our ability to give people real feedback, the number of times in my own companies that I've run into people where they say, well, we want to fire this person, they're not performing. Say, great, did you give them any feedback? Yeah, kind of. Did you really? Did you write them up?
That's not the same thing. That's private, though. There should be clear and direct private communication with everybody, no question about that. But the public nature of the whippings, if that's the right term.
I didn't see them as whipping. I didn't always include the person's name. I didn't see them as whippings. What I saw them as is learning opportunities for everyone to learn.
That's fine
and I really spun it that way. But I can tell you this, in the 15 years of directly running the business, and then the 5 years when I was chairman and didn't have day-to-day operations, I never fired a person ever for making a mistake. I fired people for being unethical. I fired people for being disloyal, but I've never fired anyone for making a mistake.
Same is true for me, by the way.
I've fired people for making the same mistake the third time.
You know what? I don't really want
Which meant I was too patient at least one time. So.
My goal is learn from the mistake. Everybody learn. We just paid a lot of money, whether it was a proposal that didn't go through, whether it was a project that got screwed up, whether it was a customer that we lost. We paid a big price to get this lesson. We, as a company, need to learn this lesson better than our competitors.
I'm with you.
Let's share it out. Everybody learn from it.
Sure.
And let's not make that same mistake.
By the way, one other thing. Just when we talk about, and I was hoping we would get some vibrant discussion, so that's why I was asked to be on this. But I told you it was controversial and not you know, we would raise some questions. The one thing is, just to be clear, I don't put somebody's name in there to target that person, but you know, it's very hard when you're working on something. So he's just
collateral damage?
What's that?
He's just collateral damage, it's okay?
You know, what we look at it differently. We say, you know, the people in our company said, hey, tough day. Tomorrow, you know, Glenn won't even remember it, and that's true because we learned, we moved on, and like I say, just like Mark said, never fired anybody because of it. And people make, you know, I would say our ratio of mistakes, I got to be careful, there's probably a camera going, is higher than most companies. So again, it's this because people they know that, you know, hey, look, if you make a mistake, you're going to get called out for it. You might get named, you might not. If it's a team, I'm not going to list every member of the team. I'm going to say,
my only experience with this sort of thing was during one of my brief forays into corporate America to make money to pay back my creditors from a failure in the past. And I worked for a large company that was just like that named names. And I've never seen a less open to risk company than that one. Nobody wanted to take any chances at all, ever. And it was reflected in every kind of performance metric you could find. And they didn't understand about the company.
A comment from Al.
I think so. Let's open it to questions.
Oh, we're going to move off of that.
We got people thinking about it. Go ahead.
I think it's a great discussion because I think feedback is really important. We believe in feedback in our company. But we talk about the importance of a team. And I've never seen a major mistake that was a learning experience ever made by a single person. Correct. So I think the way we do in our company is we say, how did that happen? What would we do differently? What did we learn from it? We don't single out the individual, because if one person did something and 6 people observed it and never said anything, then those people are also open to the feedback. So we like to look at how did the team look at that? What did we learn? What did we do differently? And when you single out an individual, you then make you think that the individual actually can make the contribution all by himself or herself, which I think it's usually the team.
There's something important. You've got to go beyond that one step. That is, take what you learn and memorialize that and make it part of your culture. so that the culture understands, everybody in the culture understands risk is okay, mistakes are okay. If you learn from it, you're a better company in total. There's a tendency to bury failure sometimes that I think can take away the benefit of what you just described.
Yes.
Yeah, Dave Holliday from Indianapolis, Indiana. Jim Collins writes about the importance of getting the right people on the bus and in the right seats. I'd love to hear your comment, first of all, whether or not what you think about that concept, and a number of you talked about the importance of a team, but when you're starting from a dead stop and you want to hire and engage people on your team that are smarter than you and potentially much higher compensated than you're able to afford perhaps when you're starting, how do you persuade those really bright people to get on the bus with you?
Mark?
For me, it was very simple. I basically was creating an opportunity where people could challenge themselves, grow in a way which they could not grow at their current environment, whether it was a current job or coming out of school or whatever. And basically, I would give people an unbridled opportunity to pursue what they really like to do. And it really turned out to be a great thing. I mean, because and I wanted people to push the envelopes. There was no penalty in failing. There was a great opportunity to really take it to ways which we had never thought of was possible before. And people who are really, really smart and who are really, really committed to what they do love that opportunity. They love the challenge. They love the recognition. I mean, I was just as quick to recognize when a group did something which I didn't think was possible. We'll call them out. We'll give them lots of accolades. We'll give them, they go play whirly ball or do whatever they wanted to go do. That type of stuff, but it really is the opportunity to do things that they can't do in a lot of other places. Because in so many organizations, they're plugged as a puzzle piece. You're going to do this, here's the boundaries, don't do this because that's someone else's job, don't do that because that's above your pay grade, don't do this because that's below you. I have just basically wanted to solve the problem for our customers because we wanted to win more customers, because if we won more customers, we were a better company.
I'd add to that, the key in our case, in both companies, PEMSTAR and Hardcore Computer, which is find people that share in the vision and share in what you're trying to accomplish. And it's important to get that so they can engage in a team. And sometimes you miss. It's not, it doesn't happen often, but I think our record was somebody was there for 4 hours, and at the end of 4 hours they can clear, this just isn't our cup of tea, and that was somebody coming from a corporate environment. But it's find people that'll fit that vision, fit what you're trying to accomplish, and then drive it from there.
I would suggest also listen to them and make sure they fit. Sometimes in your zeal to go after a star and you really sell very hard, you oversell without knowing it. I think we all do that. They come aboard and they find out it's not really what they thought. They bought into the sales pitch more than they bought into the reality. And you really want them to fit. You want them to be the right people for the long term. Nobody wants turnover in really important positions. So if they don't say yes after a certain amount of explaining what you're doing, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe they didn't belong there in the first place. Maybe you've been spared some pain.
And don't underestimate the value of a good cocktail party. Because when you get people around that you work with, get a little bit of liquor in them, their spouses around, you get great feedback in a really short period of time. And I'll tell you, it worked well for me all the time.
Let me, without the liquor.
Yeah, there's a question.
What we do is we let them talk to a lot of people, direct reports and the like. And we're fortunate because like today we have in Allscripts, we have a few hundred people who've worked at least one of our companies before who've come back. And so it's great for them to talk to, not who they're interviewing with, but we tell them, go and ask everybody, what's the worst thing about working here? Because if you can get those, if they still want to come after they hear that, and then it is about team. It's not just about, because I agree, hiring a superstar is really risky. It's better to hire a great team player.
Yes, question.
Hi, this is Arjun. I actually wanted to ask Glenn a question, keeping education and trends in mind. Where there are a lot of entrepreneurs that believe that being, as a student, I view this as even if you drop out of college or build a company on the side, and that seems to be the way of success. But when entrepreneurs like Peter Thiel are investing $100,000 in companies that are run by people who are under the age of 20, he invested $2.4 million recently. Is it a new trend in education? Is it something that's being more prevalent in society where education isn't the venue for success anymore and building a company is probably a better, more sure way of getting success?
Well, there's a number of ways to answer that. One, I think education, if you're talking about education in the traditional sense of having a college degree, I think that's probably less important, especially in certain areas of, the internet and other areas, if you have a great idea. But, again, one of the things we talked about is commitment. And you can learn an enormous amount on the internet. You can learn from a variety of sources. So you can see great people who come on board who may be younger, they may be older. It doesn't really matter. So I think it's not just one criteria that you should use. That said, my view is learn as much as you can. I do think our current educational system is fundamentally broken, and that all of that's going to move to the internet. And so as it does, that's going to allow people to learn in different ways. It's going to turn upside down what degrees mean and the like. But we now hire. We've taken out a few things on our employment applications. Home phones, which we used to have a mandatory field of home phones. We'll try that with young people, and increasingly with people who are older. Second thing is just sheer education. You have to have this degree or that degree. Doesn't really apply anymore. We want to look for the fit. So I don't know if that answers it, but I would not invest in someone because they hadn't finished college or what have you. It's a level of maturity. It's what they've been through in their life. We have a lot of people coming back from the armed forces these are young kids who are 20 years old who've had more responsibility over in Iraq and Afghanistan than 3/4 of the college graduates we interview. And so we love to hire those kind of folks.
So which part of education, specifically in business schools, because I'm from the New York Institute of Technology School of Management, which part of the business school would you recommend changing or altering to better prepare students for the coming age, especially in the internet space?
Well, again, it depends. It's a longer discussion. It depends if you're going to be an engineer, you need to go and learn basic principles. If you want to go out and start a business, I do some teaching at Harvard and at Kellogg, and I always tell them that if you want to go out and start a business, then go out and start a business, and you can watch Michael Porter you can buy his best videos, and you can read his books, and you don't have to be housed in a really nice facility to do that. So I think there's just a number of ways to acquire knowledge now today.
Scott, you had a question?
Scott Keffer, thank you, first of all, very much. Great insights from all of you, different perspective, and really appreciate it. So if your son or daughter was starting a business today, I just wondered what one piece of advice would you give them?
I think Jim needs to start because it's clearly firecrackers, isn't it?
Read the book, right?
Yeah, okay.
I think today you can start a business more easily than you can start a company. People get caught up in thinking, I want to start a company. Start a business. Find a way to make something work financially. So just freaking do it, Just get out there with your credit card and do it. Try something. You'll fail. It's okay. You'll learn from it. You'll figure it out. You don't need an office. You don't need a staff. You don't need lots of things around you. Just try something.
Hi.
Bonnie?
My name is Malcolm Ilvey. Two of the things...
excuse me 1 second. Hang on. Bonnie?
Well, I'm sorry. All I was going to say is I do have a son that has started a business, and he never ceases to amaze me at how capable he is. And I think it's the value his greatest value that I see is in his ability to carefully think through a problem and come up with a solution that many times is a compromise, where his ego doesn't get in the way, and to really focus on what's the right path for the business. Because as we all know, sometimes you can win the battle but lose the war, and that's something that's hard for some people to understand. So it's a collective kind of a thing of how you really view what a business means to you.
Thanks, Bonnie.
I'd like to hear a couple more. Do you mind?
No.
Sure, mine's really quick. One, I tell them to first travel, because especially in the U.S., you got to spend time in India and China and around the world. Second, I wouldn't rush to go into a business, especially a big business. And lastly, I do what you love to do, because I have a son, my oldest is a glass blower, and my first reaction was, well, how do you make money doing that? And he lasted all of one semester in college, and that wasn't for him. And once I got over that, now people say, oh, it's great, he's just a glass blower and you're okay with that. Yeah, I'm okay with that. That's a decision he made. So now I'm okay with it, and I get credit for that. But the reality is that's what he loves to do, and he'll do just fine, and then he'll move on. Is it going to be what he does forever? I don't know. So I think we've got to give folks some room to grow, but you got to get them out in the world.
As someone who's just spent a good chunk of this summer, my son was home for two-week breaks. He was a junior in college now, and Glenn just talked about traveling the world. My son goes to school at a fairly good school, which I was thrilled he got into. But he is studying abroad, and I think it's the vacation plan, but he's studying right now in Nepal. Then he goes to in his winter quarters in Auckland, New Zealand. Then his spring quarters in Nice, France. And he's got great reasons why he's doing it, outside of the fact that they just happen. He's picking the right holiday seasons for each of them. People will ignore that. And when he worked in Cape Town, South Africa a year and a half ago, because why? The World Cup was there. Oh, but he had a great job too. But my whole thing is, first off, I don't want him to rush in to do a business. I want him to find what he truly loves. I was very fortunate. And to the question about education, there are several people who quit college and have done well in business. Unfortunately, in that scenario, as in my scenario, I'm the rarity. I believe in what I did, and I got lucky. I was able to be good at it. I enjoyed it. I was able to be good at it. I got paid to do it, and I made money from it. Not many people have those four aligned in a certain way. And so I want my son to spend a lot of time learning, discovering himself, discovering the world, and before he gets that commitment, make sure that when he gets to where he feels compelled to start a business, to provide a service, or to do something, it's something he truly believes in. Because when you get into it, you have to put your whole being into it. You have to be passionate about it. You have to think about it. You have to wake up with it. You have to go to sleep with it. And the reality of that is you need to really understand yourself and the opportunity at hand. And that is what I think is the driving force for him.
Al, you have the last word.
The thing I'd add to is I agree with a lot that's been said, is find something you like, do it extremely well, and do it better than anyone else, but also find other people that do it, because you're not going to change the world as one person. You're going to change it with a group of people, and to the extent you can find others, and that's best to do that at an early age, that have the same vision, have the same desire to accomplish what you do. Start picking them up early.
Small counterpoint, sorry, but I would worry that there's a saying, perfect is the enemy of good. If you're waiting for the perfect opportunity, if you're taking your time to find something, how many chances have you missed to learn something through trying and failing? I agree. I think something to be said for that. Get out there and try stuff.
One of my key phrases, done beats perfect every time.
Okay.
So on that note, I'm not going to take that last question. I just want to thank Al Burning, Jim Dolan, Bonnie Baskin, Glenn Tolman, Mark Tebbe. Thank you so much for being on this panel. Thank you all for being here. Well done. Come on, give me.
Well, hey, stop. Getting a little Indian on it.
Thank you.